Hello and welcome to Huddersfield Town's post-match show in association with Sportsbroker after a disappointing 3-2 defeat to Wycombe Wanderers. To talk us through what went wrong in the game, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by former Huddersfield Town centre midfielder Dean Whitehead and broadcast Andy Lawson. Are you both okay?
Yeah, I'm fine, thank you.
Yeah, good, Adam. Are you all right?
Yeah, not too bad at all. I could be better, actually.
You could be warmer as well, looking at the state if you have to sit in the ground for a bit, yeah.
Yeah, it was very cold. Dino, I'll start with you. Ultimately, a really disappointing defeat, especially when you're 2-0 ahead after the first 40 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be, it's going to take, the manager and the staff and the players, a little bit of time to get over the disappointment, having been 2-0 up and relatively cruising really in the game. And you have a chance to put the ball across the goal for a tap in for Isaac to make it 3-0. And you think that's going to be too far for Wycombe. And then, 2-0 we know is always a dangerous scoreline. And for them to score just before half time, galvanised them a bit. You could see they were sprinting in at half time. They couldn't wait to get in and sort things out and get going. And Huddersfield just knocked them a little bit. And in second half, I think they kind of just they panicked. They didn't make the right decisions. Too many loose balls. It's something that we've seen before. But and obviously Wycombe, they upped their tempo. They got it up to Ekpezu, who was excellent. There's Keogh and Sarr and Hoggy when he dropped into the back three for long periods of the game. They couldn't handle him, and there was no real back press from Vallejo and Bacuna to try and nick it off the front of him. But he caused all sorts of problems. So he allowed too many balls to come in the box, and Wycombe thrive on that. That's their game. They get it forward quickly. They jump on second balls. They're enthusiastic, and then they get balls in the box. And Huddersfield were better first half and Wycombe second half. So it was a tough one to take.
Yeah, I mean, Andy, Dino touched upon it there, but that goal just before half time for Wycombe was the main turning point in the game, wasn't it?
Yeah, you could really see it, as Dee mentions, that the first half for Town was so much more connected. Everybody was making good, intelligent runs off the ball. Lots of things were happening that were really positive for Town. Obviously, we get the 2 goals in the first half, and you could just see, and I think just at the moment there is a slight feeling of nervousness that I'm sensing as a fan, is that when everything's going fine, we really enjoy our football, but it just takes a slight setback and a nervousness seems to fill the team. And today, yeah, we really saw that. I mean, there's always the thing in football, isn't that kind of cliche, you don't want to concede just before half time. And today, I think we actually saw a perfect example of, if you don't watch out, what can happen when you do when you do concede a goal just before the break.
I'm interested, Dean, in terms of 2 perspectives here. Firstly, as a player, when you concede just before half-time, you were cruising at 2-0, everyone was confident, you looked like you were playing well and you could, like you say, score a third. You concede that goal. What's that like as a player going in at half-time? But then also from a coach's perspective, what's that like in the same instance when, again, you've been seeing your game plan, it's working, but then they've nicked a goal at the end of the half?
Yeah, I think it slightly does change the manager's halftime team talk. The players would have been well aware at halftime that they dominated the game. The movement was good. You could see energy. You could see forward runs. There was chances, and they nicked one. And I think the main message would have been just before they go out, let's get on top of them first. Start the second half. Don't let them get on top of us and almost make the game how they want it, which they didn't first half. I mean, Wycombe, they didn't really do too much. Yes, they had a couple of half chances, hit the crossbar, but in general, I mean, Huddersfield controlled the game. But second half, they completely got Huddersfield out of their rhythm. There was no time on the ball. They were dropping onto the second balls, and I think that would have been the main thing. Try and start the second half well, the way they started first half, and unfortunately that didn't happen.
As a player, what's that like mentally as well? Because you're in control, you're 2-0 up, you think we've got a really good chance to win this game. That goal goes in, and all of a sudden, you, like Andy said, you get that nervousness.
Yeah, you do, but you have to remain confident. You have to remain calm. You have to remain, clear-headed but focused and on what the job is really. And Wycombe kind of just took over the game, completely took over it, and Huddersfield really struggled to get any rhythm, any play together, any sort of real chances, and and then Wycombe were they're throwing balls into the box. But in terms of mentality, I think it's difficult when you lose a goal, but having dominated so much, you have to remain confident.
Mentality's an interesting one there, Andy, because Dino said after that goal, the players running in, that you could see the Wycombe players were sprinting in to see what they could do differently and to get going again for the second half. The Town players were obviously dejected to concede a goal so late on. The start of the second half, to be fair, we created some half chances with Pippa, but ultimately Wycombe controlled that second half. And I wonder from a fan's perspective, what that was like for you watching in terms of seeing the players mentally.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed the first half. I'd enjoyed seeing Lewis O'Brien in the left back role making these great runs and things that he'd been doing. The goals were obviously brilliant to see, and I suppose just with the run of form that we're in at the moment, once they scored, you knew as a fan, your mentality toward it was obviously you were becoming a bit more nervous. You could see as well that the players were. But I think as you were watching that second half, once we started to get toward the penalty, which I think was around the 62nd minute or so, you could see that, Ikpeazu suddenly was really dominating up front for Wycombe. And we were playing more along the back line, maybe toward the midfield, but you could just tell generally Wycombe were pressing us back a little bit, which I felt, came into that nervousness from Town of, well, we don't want to make a big pass particularly or take any risks anywhere just because we want to keep it tight. And that, in a way, started to play towards how Wycombe wanted it to be. So I suppose if you look at it, we dominated the game in the first half. We played how we wanted to play. And we just watched in that second half, Wycombe just increased their domination until we got to a point where really, they were in charge of that game.
How did we let Wycombe back into that game, Dino? Was it the sense that we kind of stopped playing the way we wanted to? Was it a shift in mentality? Was it the fact that they used Ikpeazu so well in that second half?
Yeah, and I think they did, but I think the one of the main things is, yes, they got the goal before half time, but I think the second half they stepped onto Huddersfield more. They took an extra 1 or 2, 3, 4 yards, the whole team, and I understand the philosophy of the club that they play out from the back, and at times it works perfect. But when you're under pressure and you're under a string of results where you have been struggling to win and you're in front, I think sometimes you don't always have to play inside the box. You can play around them, you can play over them, and I think they had that many players high up the pitch that they may have been able to drop one into Fraser or drop one into Isaac. But I understand, and I'm a real big believer in the philosophy of playing from the back. I do really, really like that. But there are times when you are feeling a little bit under pressure, and the team is sensing that and thinks, go on, play that short one. And then they're all over you. And there is no harm in playing it forward, whether that be a little bit longer or forward wider. I just felt that Wycombe really sensed that they knew they were going to play out so right. They were going to step everybody up the pitch and put more pressure on them and force mistakes, and they did that.
And to be fair to Wycombe, Andy, I mean, you could see how the game played into their hands and how much they kind of stepped up their mentality, their spirit, their fight in that second half once they'd got back into that game.
I think really it's as Dino says, almost they'd worked out how we were going to play this game, which largely was going to be how we play in our new style these days. And they knew they could step up to it. They knew that, well, if they did all, go further up the field, more toward the halfway line or a bit further into our half, you knew we were going to still try and play it out directly from the back. Sorry, not directly, but, from the back, across the back line, and play it out from there. And I guess from a fan point of view, I'm with Dino, and I'm with the club completely. I love the attacking style that we play. I love the way that we do it. Just on occasion, I suppose it would be nice just to mix it up a little bit. Just for, just 10 minutes or so, just mix it up, do something a bit different, just so that the opposition can lose track of what we're trying to do. Just at the moment, maybe we're a bit easy to read. We're more than likely to play it at the back. And so that, I think, ultimately today, Wycombe took advantage of that. And we've then seen what's happened as they put pressure on our defence.
We've mentioned Ikpeazu a fair amount already, but Dino, you touched upon what we could have done better with him, but we know what their outlet was going to be. We knew, Carlos said it pre-match, that a lot of their goal kicks would go straight to him. When we know he's the kind of main target man, what could we have done differently to help control him? Because Andy mentioned it earlier that he was getting the beating of Naby Sarr, Chikio, Jonathan Hogg. He was pulling onto quite a lot, obviously, because he's not the same aerial threat as the other two. But when they've got one guy up front, what can the other centre halves do? You mentioned Alex Vallejo and Juninho Bacuna as well. In terms of the shape, what can we do differently to manage their main threat and their main asset?
Yeah, I think obviously the way the managers set it up in terms of when they were building up from the goalkeeper, then Hoggy was the right side of the three at the back almost, wasn't he? He was more so like a 3-4-1-2 pretty much. And when Wycombe had the ball, then Hoggy ended up as a right-sided. Obviously he was still in that slot. I just think when balls were going up there, I think the two central midfielders at that point would have, whether that was Dwayne Holmes at the time, because they were rotating pretty well, to be fair, in possession. As soon as they lost the ball, I think they had to get closer and close that gap. So he couldn't have another touch, play out the other side, or link play. I just think they could have just back press from the front of him, really, because he's a big lad. You're not going to get round him, and if you can nick balls off the front of him, then great. But he was a handful all day, and it's tough for centre backs.
Yeah, it certainly was. Andy, we'll run through the goals now, starting with Town's opener. To be fair, Fraser Campbell should take a lot of credit for his work in both the goals, but particularly the first. And I don't know if you noticed his movement off the back to give Alex Vallejo that option and that pass.
Yeah, I also noticed in the build-up to that, I actually saw Bacuna making a real run across the box. And I'll be honest with you, at the time when we scored, I did actually shout offside, because I'm like, how has Bacuna kind of come back from that? But obviously it did. And Fraser Campbell puts the cross in for him, and fair play to Bacca to get into that position. But I suppose that goes back to what I was saying earlier, was we were making runs, and the fact that Bacuna was going across the box, it was taking a Wycombe defender with him. Because of the kind of TV angles and things, we've not actually seen the kind of offsideness, but I'm not going to argue with the linesman at all. As far as I'm concerned, that's there's no problem there. And then, again, Isaac and Benza with the second goal for Town. Both good finishes, both well composed, well taken goals. And to be honest, I didn't think we were necessarily going to cruise it at that point, but I was really hopeful. Good, could this be our opportunity to just kick on and have a good game and get a 2-3-4-0 win and just, finish off an opponent almost, which is not something we've been brilliant at doing of late.
Yeah, very, very true. And before we move on to the second goal, Dino, Andy mentioned it there. We were making lots of runs off the ball, moves forwards. That didn't happen in the second half. Do you think that was because of the way that Wycombe changed their press, or do you think that was something kind of mentally for Town, where they were trying to hold on to the result?
Yeah, I think it's probably a bit of both. I mean, you obviously see first half, it looked like the Fraser and Isaac were playing a little bit wider strikers almost, rather than obviously one down the middle, and they were causing all sorts of problems in between the fullbacks. And so whether they were trying to protect what they had. You know, they haven't won for a while. That's normal. That's the way it works sometimes. But I think Wycombe, you got to credit Wycombe. They stopped them. They stepped on them. They forced mistakes. Yes, there was a lot of decision making which wasn't right, but you know, you get that in football matches, and I just think you have to credit Wycombe for really putting their stamp on the second half, really.
Yeah, and then obviously Town went 2-0 up. Dino, when you were last on the show, you mentioned wanting the wingers or the attacking players to get at defenders a little bit more. And I suppose when Isaac went round his man and drilled that left-footed effort into the back of the net, you thought, yeah, that's exactly what I meant 2 weeks ago. Yeah,
I think so. And when you know, he's got goals and assists probably more than anybody in the Huddersfield squad at the moment. And you know, he's talented, he's quick. You know, he needs to do it more. You see it with the goal. Pippa obviously cut inside and was driving across the pitch. Lewis did it numerous times in the first half, especially, and it just overloads them in the middle. And obviously they found a bit of space for Isaac, and there was a good left foot finish. But to be honest, I'd be looking at my goalkeeper. To be honest, yeah, because I know what Isaac's left foot's like, and it's. It wasn't exactly a bullet, was it? But we'll take it.
Yeah, we'll absolutely take it. Andy, right at the start of that move, Fraser Campbell was kind of integral to that, holding up the ball, coming deep to get it. We speak a lot about him a lot on these shows, pre and post, and whether he kind of gets in the positions and gets the chances that he deserves for his work rate. But off the ball and in terms of the build-up that he's involved in, he's really valuable in this system.
Fraser is a massive player for this football team. When we're playing at full flow, Fraser Campbell is always at the very front of it, and he's always looking for the players that he can bring in. Back when Josh Koroma was in the team, a lot of the goals that he was scoring were set up by Fraser Campbell. We've seen today just how important he is. I can imagine that he, as a forward, would like himself to score more goals, but I think his impact to the team is so massive off the ball, just the little runs that he makes, the way that he puts the pressure on the defenders. And actually, Town as a team, we do have a lot of players who are extremely good in the build-up to getting the ball to the attacking parts of the field. I mean, you earlier, Adam, I think for the first goal mentioned Alex Vallejo, and I look at him and think since the Plymouth game, he's actually become a real integral part to a lot of our attacking moves. So he's another one that deserves great plaudits for what they do off the ball. There's a lot of real positives there. And for me, Town, we saw the amount of chances that we created in the first half. If we could just put in just a few more of these chances, we would be way higher up the table. We would be a team that people were still talking about. Could we be making a run for the playoffs? We just need to work out how to get that final ball into the box to Fraser, to Isaac, to whoever's up there. Just do it a bit more often. Just try and get more chances that really test opposition keepers. And I think we're fine. We're nearly there. We're so nearly there. We just need to do it a little bit more often.
Yeah, and I guess, Dino, on the flip side to that, Fraser's doing all this excellent work off the ball. He's setting chances up for his teammates. But that's where you need players, isn't it, to kind of step forward and become a kind of key goal scorer for the side. Because since Josh Koroma is now obviously injured and hasn't been able to play for us, we haven't really had that clear goal scorer.
No, they haven't. I completely agree with Andy there. I mean, Fraser's work rate is, you know, his selfishness off the ball, even on the ball where he makes runs and other people get the ball. Very intelligent. Just needs to get in the right positions. You know, once he has done that to get himself in the box or somebody else, because if you are in the build-up and you are heavily involved, then somebody else has to be in the position to score. But you know, I think obviously Huddersfield have struggled with with someone that, you know, is a prolific goal scorer, is going to give you 15, 20 goals for many years now, I think.
Yeah, and Andy, obviously then just before half time, a goal that we touched upon quite a lot already, Mehmeti's goal that really fired Wycombe forwards. Defensively, what do you think we could have done a little bit better to stop that?
I think generally when you look at the Town defence, you see where everybody's playing, and as Dino's mentioned, that we were at times we were a back four, we were a back three sometimes, and I'll be honest, that specific goal, Adam, just at this very second, I can't think exactly how it came about. But I know quite often when you look at how a goal maybe is scored against Town, there might be a player who's run into the box that maybe we haven't quite worked out who's going to cover them. And that extra step or so is given the opportunity to actually get in and cause us that damage. And I suppose as a fan, I would probably look at that and say, we probably spend so much time going forward and looking at how we can attack that sometimes, yes, defensively we're left a little bit frail, and sometimes the goals can come against us just because there is that gap in our defensive play.
Yeah, he had quite a lot of room. It was a good finish, to be fair, wasn't it, Dino? But he should have probably been closed down a little bit quicker.
Yeah, it was a decent finish, but I think there was 3 or 4 Huddersfield players, but obviously just inside the box. You have to be careful, but you have to get closer when you've got that many players over. I mean, I think it was 2 or 3 players more than Wycombe had. So, you know, you have to get there closer and close the ball down. Really, it was the same almost with the third goal. I mean, it's a very similar situation, very similar part of the pitch, and a similar finish. But you know, at some point the mistakes and the concentration towards the back. I don't mean just the defenders. I mean the whole team has to shift a little bit.
Yeah, and then the second goal came from the penalty spot, but I think it was Hoggy that brought down the Wycombe striker. Dino, he was a handful, and we've touched upon him a lot. In that situation, though, you can't get drawn into making a tackle, can you?
No, and I think at that point in the game, I think if I looking at Ikpeazu at that time, I think he knew he had Keogh where he wanted him to. You know, Keogh was getting really tight. He knew he had the strength and the speed over him, and he cut across him, and it was a good decision for Keogh to leave him at that point. And then I think Hoggy just kind of clipped heels, which is always going to be a penalty, which is disappointing. But you know, he was a threat. He was a threat. Doesn't look the best technically. Doesn't look the best mover. But you know, Wycombe play to his strengths, and you know, it helped them get themselves back into it. Yeah,
they certainly made him effective. And the final goal, Josh Knight scored it. There was a little bit of fortune about it, wasn't there? From memory, I think, was it Scott High's deflection off Scott High that fell to him? It's when things aren't going your way, they really aren't, are they?
Yeah, if I remember, I mean, I remember the Scott High attempted header, but if I remember, it was coming from a free kick. It was on the Wycombe right hand side. They cross it over. Scott High makes a very fair attempt at trying to clear the ball. The header, unfortunately, just doesn't connect with it properly. It's then skews off to the Wycombe player. And I suppose when you're in the kind of ascendancy that Wycombe were in at that point, things in a game start to run for you. And I guess as a defence, it's your job to make sure that for the opposition, things don't run for them. But on a day like today, it runs for Wycombe, and nicely finished. Another shot, if I remember right, from the left-hand side, crossed across the keeper to the other side of the net. And yeah, it was a really unfortunate goal. I just suppose with the way that today was going, it's one of those goals that, well, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen on a day like today.
Yeah. Dino, after the game, Carlos Corberán said we played with too many doubts. In terms of that, you could kind of sense that among the players, couldn't you? I mean, after we mentioned the mentality after we kind of went 2-1 down, and the players were and did look dejected. They came out in the second half, didn't quite look themselves. When you're in a period like we are, I think it was seven games without a win, still looking for our first win of 2021. How much does that play on the minds of players when you're meant to be brave with the ball, when you're meant to make a certain run, or equally defensively when you should do the hard yards and run back towards your own goal?
Yeah, I think it's it can be a difficult one when you've not won for a period of time, and you do get in front and you feel like you deserve to be in front, and then all of a sudden you get a setback. Yes, you are. You do get anxious. You do want to almost overprotect, and we've seen it on many occasions when you overprotect. You have too many players in a certain area. Nobody takes responsibility for the ball and for the man. And I just think that the most frustrating thing, I think, will be for the manager will be first half, second half performance. I see it at Stoke, first half, second half performance. Some really, really good positive play in the first half. I see lots of movement. The midfield players fluid. I see the fullbacks really high coming inside. The wingers making runs out to in and into out and causing them all sorts of problems. And then second half, you see almost the complete opposite, that they're almost not the same team, not the same players. But I'm sure he knows that, and he'll be working on things to change that.
Yeah, and we've got a good opportunity to get that first win, Andy, on Tuesday night. It's a quick turnaround, but I suppose it can work in both ways, can't it? There's no better way to make up for a disappointment than getting back out there on the grass.
Yeah, I think Dino would probably agree with this. Is that I think I hear a lot of footballers say when you're maybe in a bad run, you want to get into games quickly so that you can turn this around as speedily as you possibly can. So I think the fact that we're playing on Tuesday night, I think that is going to help Huddersfield Town. Hopefully we are going to, maybe in the warm down and things tomorrow, we're going to, I don't know, maybe work on some of the technical things. We'll try more of the attacking things again in the next couple of days. But basically, I'm looking forward to Tuesday night. I mean, it's Neil Warnock. I always love playing against Neil Warnock. It's always good fun to take on a Neil Warnock side. And hopefully, fingers crossed, we are going to be able to take something from that game. And I'm really hopeful if we can perform like we did in the first half, I'm really sure we can start to get things from these future games.
Yeah, Dino, I just want to end with you. You mentioned the positives there. The Stoke game that in the first half was good. Again, against Wycombe, the first half was good. How far do you think Huddersfield Town are from putting in that full performance and killing off games? Because like you said, there's elements of good things, there's things that we need to work on. How far away do you think we are?
I honestly, from the games that I've seen, obviously I've not seen as much as you guys, but I don't think they're far at all. There was probably a ball across the box today, and Isaac puts it in for 3-0, and all of a sudden, it's happy days. But that didn't happen, and they have to keep. The manager obviously has to keep delivering the instructions that he wants. The players are delivering for large parts of the game, and I think they just got to keep confidence as high as it can be at a stage where you feel like things are going against you. But stick to the process, stick to the plan, and stay focused and move towards the next match.
Absolutely, and hopefully we can bounce back on Tuesday night. Dino, Andy, thank you very much for talking us through the game, and Town fans, thank you for watching.